For more, let's turn to Assistant Director of the FBI and CBS News security analyst Ron Hosko. He joins me now from Washington. Ron, I want to first get your reaction from the people that you've talked to at the Bureau. What are they saying?
Well, Rena, they're very concerned about this current engagement, the dialogue that's going on in Washington, D.C. I think their concerns are legitimate. We've heard now from Chairman Nunes essentially one side. The notion that this is giving us as citizens transparency into the process is ridiculous. You cannot distill the FBI's work that probably is a very thick investigation down to 3.5 pages that some are saying is cherry-picked. I'm going to have to assume that is true until we hear fully what the other side has to say. Hopefully this Democratic memo will come out and maybe add a little bit of clarity. But we're talking about a classified process, a classified investigation that is not going to be exposed to the light of day through hearings. It's just not going to happen that way. So what we're left with is very, very little bits of information that seems, politically driven.
And you know what caught our eye when you step back for a second, big picture here, Ron, there was a new poll out that finds 38% of Republicans, only 38% approve of the FBI, while 64% of Democrats approve. What do you make of that?
I make of it politics. First, we have to, for me, admit some FBI activities that should raise doubt and raise eyebrows. We don't know how seriously the Inspector General will adjudge the actions of Deputy Assistant Director Peter Strzok and FBI Attorney Lisa Page. Certainly that's going to raise some doubt about politics in the FBI. But the question is were there personal political views? Did they lead to political decisions on cases, on investigative activity? With Strzok, at least, I think the answer to that is mixed, because this is the very person that was recommending, I understand, reopening the Hillary Clinton investigation in October of 2016. So if we think he was totally driven by politics, why would somebody driven that far that was pro-Hillary recommend to the organization that they have to reopen the Hillary investigation? So there's some, I think there's some perhaps some paradoxes there.
Yeah, and you look at those texts, there's something like more than 5,000 texts between them, and a very small portion actually focused on it. But you also raise an interesting point, Ron. I want to ask you, though, also about when you look at President Trump and the Republican skepticism of the FBI, how do you think that this could affect Robert Mueller's Russia investigation?
Well, that's the $10,000 or $100,000 question right now. Is the president? We just heard your sound bite or saw your video bite about the Trump reaction to Rod Rosenstein and his confidence in him yesterday. My fear, frankly, is that the president takes some precipitous action on the Deputy Attorney General, and that we then see a domino effect. Does Christopher Wray, the FBI director, sympathetically resign from office as well? Who else? Would Rachel Brand, the number 3 over at Department of Justice, does she say, hey, look, I'm not firing Mueller either, and sympathetically resign? How bad does it get if the president does something precipitous? And I think hopefully there are a lot of folks across America that just want to know the truth about Russia. And was there Russian collusion? But do all these other actions add to the pile of perceived obstruction of justice by the president? And
you mentioned these big names. I want to, though, ask you, there's a New York Times op-ed today, and one agent actually lists the reasons for leaving the FBI. I want to read you a little bit of what he says. He says, my resignation is painful, but the alternative of remaining quiet while the Bureau is tarnished for political gain is impossible. What do you think? If people at the top were to leave, that's one thing. We know about it. But when you talk about the rank and file, the folks doing the work of the FBI, what do you make of that resignation letter today in the Times?
Yeah, it's troubling. Look, there is long-term and short-term damage ongoing with the FBI. Again, some of it self-inflicted, but I know the folks that I worked with were apolitical professionals, sacrificing much for their country. I certainly hope that those folks don't start walking away from this great organization that is protecting America from terror, from counterintelligence threats, from criminal threats every day. They're working around the clock to do that. It is very disappointing when you see something like that in print.
Ron Hosko, thank you so much for joining us, Ron.
Sure.